So, once you get that going, let me know.
We're good to go, buddy.
Okay, all right. Introduction of guests. If you're not on Zoom and you're on the phone, could you just identify yourself so we know who's out there? Anybody on the phone at all?
John
We have
Smith.
Okay. All right. Approval of agenda. Did everybody get the agenda? Does anybody have any additions or omissions from the agenda? Or any corrections? No? Okay, let's move forward. Approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. We really don't need to take a vote for these. We just would like to have everybody's input. If they see anything on the minutes that was incorrect or needs to be changed, please let us know. Anything? EGLE staff, anybody online? I looked them over. They looked good. To be honest with you, I don't think we've ever had a problem with minutes. So
Great job, Dave.
yep.
Not you?
I think it's Anita.
Oh,
Yeah, it's Melissa today.
okay.
Oh,
She's-
all right.
Introduce Melissa, our
All
secretary.
right. So if there's no additions, omissions, or corrections, let's move on to the EGLE update. Sarah Pearson.
All right.
Did you want to introduce Melissa? Okay.
I'd like to
Okay.
introduce Melissa Salyer. She's our secretary. There she is. She's taking our minutes today and probably will be doing so in future meetings too. So just welcome, Melissa, and go from there.
With great power comes great responsibility, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So she's gonna learn a lot about us, which is good.
Is she new to the unit?
She's been here almost a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice. Well, welcome.
No.
Thank you.
Oh, wait a minute. Here we go.
Right. So I don't have a ton for updates, but other than, we've appreciated the partnership and the opportunities for training. We started out with a great year with the conference, and then we did the Milan
No
days.
audio.
We have Valley Farms tomorrow. So I think we have some good opportunities for outreach, and we're setting up some opportunities to participate in watching drilling in the field, and Dave's working on some of that. So I think there's some great opportunities for learning, and now that we're out and about and post-COVID. I was
Where's my
curious,
audio?
did you send out a survey of how it felt about it, what they learned, what they thought?
No, we haven't done that yet. And to be honest with you, the board has to approve that. I can't survey. But we have a board meeting coming up, and that's one of the things that's on my agenda, because I think we should, because I heard a lot of good feedback, especially on the collaborative efforts. Basically, the roundtable meeting we had between sanitarians, EGLE, and well drillers. I thought that was a good forum for basically bringing up things that we don't want to bring up, but we bring them up and talk about them and say, did we handle them correctly? Did we not handle them correctly? How could we handle them differently? So I think that's a great forum, and we probably will have it again next year. So.
Yeah, I particularly enjoyed that, and we were pleased to see the room packed for the fundamentals. That was good.
Yeah.
Very good.
I agree. If that's it, are you done, Sarah, with that portion?
Just a reminder, it's renewal season. Renewals are due by April 30th. We're about midway through as far as the number of registrations we've received in the 300 ballpark right now. And so, just a reminder, it is renewal season and we are doing, as far as the well construction program, we are proceeding with full evaluations this year. We are gonna be back out and operating business as usual. And a fun fact is there were just over 13,000 wells drilled last year in 2022.
There we go.
But I only have 1,700-ish plugging records, so we may have some opportunities there.
So that brings us up to the next unfinished business. Maybe the reason for some of them plugging records being late is they didn't have the proper material to plug them. So Dave, Sarah, do you guys want to talk about the ASTM C150 Portland?
We are making progress. We had the public comment period. We received 2 comments and both in favor, one from MGWA, the other from the Cement Concrete Association. And we put together our package that needs to go to our executive office for them to approve before it goes over to JCAR. And it is in that process right now. It's being approved by division management, and then it's going to go to executive management next week. And then they approve it, and then it goes over to JCAR, and then they have 15 session days to take a look at it.
Do we have an idea of when it's gonna go to JCAR? Estimate?
It will be in April.
Okay. All right, I will make an appointment to go see the JCAR.
Yeah, yes, we would love to see this move along. We're pushing it from our end, and it will be great once we have this in place and solidified and in rule, and then we can proceed with all of the well construction and plugging that we need to use the cement for. Not that it's not allowed right now, we just said we would turn our head the other way.
You know, when we do the 13,000 wells for replacement, how we were doing, or do you have, does that include type 1, 2, 3, or private?
Included just everything across the board,
Okay.
irrigation, everything. I can go back and refine the numbers, but I just did a quickie poll.
Yeah. So 13 for any kind of well,
Mhm.
okay, how do you know that without the, that's just the well?
That's just the well logic data
Okay, gotcha.
that I rely on. Maybe there were more.
Nice.
That's a question.
Yeah, Sarah, I have a question. What level of confidence do you have in the supply for this specific standard? I just don't want to end up in a situation like we were in for like the last year. Do you have a high level of confidence that the supply will be able to be sustained?
That's on the industry.
I can talk to that.
Do you have?
The Concrete Association's a client of mine as well.
Okay,
So
fantastic.
Sarah, they stopped making type 1 completely, so this is the new volume cement that they are producing. Last year, there was allocation just because there was such a demand. From what I understand, the industry is predicting that there will not be allocation issues this year because new home construction has slowed down so much with the Fed raising rates and the economy. So I don't think that's going to be an issue this year. You should not see any supply issues. So I'll be surprised if there is. So.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Anything else on type 1 cement? Adam, up in your area, that's all you guys grout with. Have you had a problem?
Well, yeah, actually, I had a pretty good supply of type 1, and we just had an emergency well. Huron County in particular is 100% neat cement. And yeah, I had received word, that there were some other guys that didn't have any type 1, and I didn't have an issue at all last year because I had a pretty good supply of it. But I'm out now. So I had made a call. We had somebody without water, and I just asked the health department what they wanted me to do. And they said they just wanted the well log noted. But as far as seeing results of, it curing up and things like that, I didn't see anything really unusual.
You're talking about the type 1L versus type 1?
Yep. It mixed up about the same, and everything seemed to be just fine with it in my eyes.
Okay, good. Okay, well, MGWA appreciates EGLE's efforts in getting on this quickly, even though we know the wheels of progress when it comes to a rule change don't move as fast as we'd all like to. However, we moved as fast as possible, and we didn't get any resistance in the public hearings, which was good, or public comments. So we're keeping our fingers crossed as an industry that we can get this put to bed by June 1st or close. So that's kind of what we're hoping. So if nobody has anything else on cement, let's move on to marijuana grow facilities. So we talked about this a few times at the meetings about the vast and different types of marijuana grow facilities going in, whether it's, Billy Bob having 12 plants in his backyard, or an actual guy that's going to decide that he's going to make his money growing marijuana. And as a driller, I saw myself different size operations going in, from large industrial to, again, the guy growing 12 plants. And in discussions in these meetings with EGLE, there really isn't any guidelines for anything other than the type 2 and type 3 guidelines that we have, depending on how many people that are working there and how often, for isolation distances. And what I saw was the potential myself of a medium-sized operation deciding to become a large operation, but in the permitting process, not taking into consideration that they have a permit for a small 50-foot isolation, let's just say, from a septic system. And the next thing, they got 5,000 gallons of chemical storage, not too far away from the well. So without having a rule change and without being able to do anything, well, we went ahead and wrote a letter to our members just saying, hey, listen, when you're talking to your, I sent Dave a copy of the letter too, and he can share that with everybody. Did you get that copy, Dave?
I have been on annual leave, buddy, so I've got about 160 emails I haven't looked at yet. So I did see it in there, but I haven't had a chance to review it yet.
I will forward that letter to the invitees, to the Waterwell Advisory Committee, just basically telling our drillers, when you're out at a facility looking at a possible well location, take into consideration that this operation could grow, and even worse now, after talking to somebody who I know is on the marijuana board from Michigan, their members are hurt. That marijuana industry is just flooded with growers, and basically the profitability of our customers is nil to none. Matter of fact, I'm hearing of some of the larger operations I know for a fact are in receivership and bankruptcy. So that means cutting corners. That means not doing things properly. So we really need to be diligent when we're out at these operations as well drillers, because we know that the sanitarians can't always be there after the fact. It's just too tough. If we get lucky and they didn't do an inspection and they decide to do a final inspection 8, 9, 10 months and things have changed, that's where we can maybe find some of these things. But due diligence as an industry, as we're talking to these customers and then going back out and making repairs or whatever, I think is crucial, because right now we really don't have, other than the type 3 and type 2 guidelines, there's nothing that really covers these marijuana grow operations. So we sent a letter out. Hopefully the industry does due prudence and is very informative to the customer. That's what we're hoping for, to try to stop them, because it's not, we all know that it's not if, it's when something could happen, and then you find out after the fact. And I think letting our customers know ahead of time of, hey, if you're going to grow, let's take this into consideration and everything. So Mike, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with you 100% there, buddy. In our area last year, we had a lot of folks charge out of the gate hard, really want to get rolling on something, and we've seen the demand fall way off. In fact, one of uh, um, the sales outlets up north of our area there, they've got a sign up, marijuana sale, ounces for $45 and pre-rolls for $2. And so I think they're strapped for cash right now. So I agree. And if some of these folks go out of business, are they going to leave behind some sort of a cleanup issue? Maybe. I guess I'm wondering about on the back end of this a little bit. So that's the only question I had.
Well, that's a good question. And the problem of it is I see all sorts of holes in the regulation side of it, not by purpose, but by happenstance that I'm talking in my personal, I've got a lot of larger operations and I'm talking to them about, what are you doing with these chemicals and how are they being used and where are they being put afterwards? And well, we're not, and I'm not getting warm and fuzzy answers. They're very vague and we're not sure and we change chemicals and we might go to this and so it's a whole world of unknown. And this is probably the side of voting for this product to be not just medically but recreationally that nobody ever thought of, and we're left to deal with it. I guess as an industry and a regulation, we need to really put our nose to the grindstone and be very tough with our customers and say, hey, listen, my cousin lives down the street and whatever you're doing here, we need to make sure that you're not doing something not only to damage yourself and your own property, but your neighboring properties and contaminate a valuable water source. Even in the septic systems, we don't know what these things are going to do and how they're getting rid of these chemicals and what their possibilities of doing to septic systems. I mean, you might have septic systems literally growing something inside of them to the point of being shut. I mean, how's that all going to work? Now you've got a cesspool out there. So these are all things that I can see happening in the future. Does any of the sanitarians on the call, the EGLE staff, have they seen any issues with the waste systems? Sarah, you got your hand up?
I do know that, Buddy, there's some concern about the strength of the wastewater that's coming out of these facilities. I don't have a ton of details on it off the top of my mind, but I do know that there are some concerns about what's actually going through into the septic system because the effluent strength is different than what we see in other places. I think the other thing, like just to go back a thought for a minute, and I was thinking, Mike, about our area in particular, is that like if you have a hydroponics place or you have a outdoor grow area or whatever it might be, is I wonder at times, like if they're using the same irrigation system, do you have to be concerned about the different chemicals going through and what's actually being discharged? I think that, I guess the long way around it is I'm glad you brought up that point because it is a system that we need to think about, not just the actual well construction. We need to be looking big picture at this, especially with the different chemicals that might be coming on and off the properties if they change hands or even just with what they're doing right now on their property.
I agree with you. To not bring panic to anybody, I was talking to a grower about a outdoor grow operation and he was going to irrigate and we had a well on it. And I said, well, are you going to put anything in it? Oh yeah, we're going to add chemicals. I said, well, are you going to use a chemic check? And the question was, what's that? So a chemic check is a chemical injection check valve where the chemical can be injected downstream, but there's a check valve behind it so it can't go back into the stream if there's a failure on a check valve of the pump system. So I informed them that it's a good idea to do that, and they bought one. But what about the guy who doesn't ask the question? That's the one that gets me scared. So I think as an industry, I'm not done with this with MGWA. I've been thinking long and hard about maybe when you're on the site checklist of questions to ask and then directions to give to the owner so that they don't get themselves in trouble down the road. So that's something that I'm probably going to put together with Mike, and then we'll get it out to the members. Has any other drillers got any other comments or EGLE staff on this? Okay. If not, I'm going to move on to Michigan Groundwater Association Annual Conference and Fundamentals Training. As we stated before, we had one of the best attended shows we've had in a long time. We thought the flow as an association, the board and I've talked a little bit on the telephone, the flow of how the meeting went, having the EGLE staff right there along with us with lunch, everybody kind of co-mingling together for the whole day, including the banquet at night, we thought was a win-win for all of us, because whether we want to admit it or not, we both have a job to do, EGLE, sanitarians, and health departments. But when it really comes down to it, our goal is all the same, of protecting this resource and providing a safe product for water for the customers and the public to use. And I think a cohesive meeting like that really brings light on really that goal. I was very pleased to see that the room with the fundamentals was bursting. We actually probably could have actually had a bigger room because people were standing in the corners. Now, some of those were observation people, maybe from myself, it was one of them. Mike was in there observing what's going on. But I think all in all, it was successful for all of us, and we're hoping to have a successful show next year. Now, with that said, Michigan Groundwater Association, because of COVID, and we had to push that facility out. The facility is very kind and hitting us with 25% upcharges on just about everything. So we're now looking at that venue along with others, and costs may be deferred different ways, but we're still going to have the sponsorship program for sanitarians in the future. And we're talking about maybe a way to have that throughout the year so we can build up a fund. So maybe prior to the announcement of the meeting, we can let EGLE know that, hey, there's this much in the fund already for sanitarians, and it's going to be this much per sanitarian. So have them get in early. So maybe not such a reactive, but a proactive approach to that part of it. So does EGLE staff or any of the sanitarians that attended have anything they want to add, or any of the well drillers on the meeting to that? I guess not. So we're on to D, and this is Michigan Groundwater Association, Michigan Association of Local Health Department Administrators, and Michigan Environmental Health Association, and Michigan Department of Health, Human Services, EGLE, Training and Outreach, multiple. Dave, did you want to talk about that for a minute?
This was just an item that I know, you said you were going to attend a Maliha meeting of sorts, at the meeting, and then there was gonna be some discussion there about training. So, you know, and then someone also, I think you also said there was gonna be some contact with DHHS, so, I just put it on
I
the
reached out to
agenda.
DHHS. I reached out. I haven't heard anything from them, but I do know that in May on this subject, we are talking, and we as Michigan Groundwater Association, Dan Mylan, we've got some engineers. We're going back to the type 1 engineers, and we're going to have a training with them. Uh-oh, my computer's shutting down. Hang on. All right, my computer was shutting down for some reason. I don't know why. So we're going to be doing that. I think this is something that I'm going to look for next year, this training. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Now we lost that. Buddy, you froze out. And it sounds like we lost Buddy. Is he talking about the Fenners?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Eric is putting on a training up in the UP, a couple of days as well. While Buddy's on hold, do you want to mention that, Eric?
Yeah, so Rob Wolf and I have been working on a couple dates. I believe that they are the 18th and the 25th. So road restrictions should still be on here. We'll just go up in our back of our field here and kind of just go through a quick presentation and then bring people here to our facility and then kind of maybe do one of two things. We might just drill a mud hole and explain that process, and then we'll do a drill and drive with the bentonite mounted on the outside of the casing for grouting, that type of thing. So we'll just kind of explain both different ways that we deal with up here.
Excellent. I've heard some good feedback. People are excited about it. And April. April. We're still without Buddy. Dave, do you want to offer anything up about the fenders?
Well, I think it's April 25th. I guess one thing I can talk about until Buddy gets back on, or May, I'm sorry. Yeah, you could tell I'm fresh off vacation here. Still haven't seen everything, but also last year, while construction had asked and tried to secure some money to do some field trainings this year, and our hope is that we'll have 3 spots around the state, hopefully this summer here, where sanitarians can go out. Right now they're scheduled for actually drilling at shops, at driller shops, and we're gonna try and get out there. 3 areas around the state, 1 in the west, 1 in the east, and 1 to the north in the lower peninsula. And we're going to try and do some drilling demonstrations out there. And once we have more details, obviously we'll provide some of that, but that is definitely in the works for this summer. I think we also, as has been typical in the past, I believe Tweak's working on trying to coordinate some fall training in person, potentially even. That's also going to be in the works here. We haven't, I don't necessarily know we have the exact locations nailed down for that either. Obviously, that's a long time off. I know you've worked on some of that stuff. But in regards to well construction, seems like we're moving right along to try and get some training out there for folks, so. I guess one other thing I could mention, I guess, since we've got a little bit of air here is, when we were talking about the C-150 cement issue, I did talk to Halliburton during before I had gone on vacation, and they had told me that the cement, the 1L, since it has the ability to vary slightly, and that 5 to 15% limestone, when they're developing all their retarders and a number of other things, for them, trying to design a product for something that has a slight variability like that has been a bit of a challenge to them and will be a challenge. But that's about the only thing I've heard from anyone in regards to something that may present some kind of challenge in the future, just that slight variability in content under the C595 standard, so.
What did they mean by that? They meant like their mixing procedure would be a little bit off from one batch to the next, or are they saying
Typically what they told me was that when they're, say, developing a retarder, when they mix it with the 1L, if it's 5% versus 15%, and they set up a little more quickly or a little less quickly, depending on, that variability in percentage for the limestone.
But the integrity is still the same, correct, Dave? Or
Yep, density. running pretty much the same. And like I said, I haven't heard anyone, if just a standard mixing or anything along those lines, had any kind of trouble in any other states. But, you know, when Halliburton, you know, is trying to develop certain chemicals and compounds to enhance or make the cement do certain things, they want, you know, an exact formulation so that they can take their formulation and make it exactly to, you know, whatever is being given to them. And if there's a slight variability in the concrete itself, then, you know, they have to try and account. And, you know, as a person that took chemistry throughout school and everything else, if you're like, well, it might be a little bit of this and a little, you know, a slight variation of this concentration, you know, it can throw things off a little bit. So,
Well, if anybody can figure it out, I'm sure they can.
yeah, they're working on it.
I'm back.
Meeting's over, buddy.
What's that? Meeting's over? I wouldn't doubt it. Must be they didn't feed the goat at our local internet company uptown, so he quit walking around in a circle. So, where did you continue to go?
There was just a little bit of discussion about Fenner Nature Center and the engineers and some of the things we're gonna offer this summer as far as field trainings for sanitarians, drilling locations, and Tweak is organizing some in-person training for sanitarians. Hopefully something that will not only run across well construction, but related to contamination investigation, source water, some other programs as non-community. So hopefully we can run the gamut with all that stuff. And then I talked just briefly about Halliburton and the cement and their thoughts. So that's
Yeah.
about it.
Nice. Okay. Well, anyway, so we're going to train type 1. That's where I was at when we were talking about talk to those people. And I think we're going to also next year offer a type 1, just a small little tidbit for a lot of our members, because I don't think a lot of them understand that on type 1, when there's some major changes in type 1 with a pump or depth or pumping amount, that there's permits required. They're a free permit, but there's permits required, and it's not only a permit required by the facility, it's a permit required by the driller. They're free. So I think we need to kind of go back over, because everybody assumes that what's for residential type 2 and type 3 is for type 1, and that's not true. So there's some things that need to be discussed, because I think there's some guys that are doing type 1 now that maybe weren't doing it before. And that goes for trailer parks and stuff too, and they don't understand that. So I think we need to reiterate that. So we got some new business here. Anybody have anything else on that for Miha, DHHS? I'm going to be putting something together. We'll figure out how we can get everybody in the same room and talk. So opportunities to improve well locations. Sarah?
Okay, well, many of you are aware, we are going through the process of cleaning up well logic and cleaning up those locations. In fact, we are bringing on 2 contractors because Michigan Geological Survey as students going in and cleaning up the well locations as best they can. But there are some that they're identifying as problem wells that there really isn't enough information for them to go on to be able to locate them. So we're hiring a couple of contractors through DHHS using MPHI to bring them in to look at these problem wells, and they'll be doing some outreach to our local health partners and seeing if there's any more information that might be available for some of these locations. to improve our percentages of wells that are corrected. And part of this here is the opportunities to improve well locations is we are still evaluating what we can do as far as a user interface for well logic to be able to allow somebody to easily identify that location on the screen and click on it just the same as you would with like Google Maps or whatever. And then all of that information and data would be, that geographic information would be auto-populated. So we don't have to worry about the township range and section number, knowing where you are, and that you can look at it on the screen because the technology is such that going and clicking on that point where you just put that well in, you can see it. And you can either do it in the field or you can do it back at your desk. It's your computer at your desk because you can pull up the map and see it and it will auto-populate. We certainly hope that that would improve the well log locations because you can see where you're putting that on there and not relying on trying to determine the coordinates and type in the coordinates because we know we all fat finger coordinates or we transpose numbers. And it just helps to eliminate some of that human error that sometimes occurs.
Can I ask a question, Sarah? When they're having trouble, and this is an if it's possible thing, because I know probably some of these logs were drilled by, let's say Eric's father or grandfather, and they're not around, or my grandfather, and they're not around anymore. But of the ones that they're having trouble with, if the driller is still available, to speed the process up, is it possible to get a list out to the drillers, even though some of them probably wouldn't reply anyways, to say, hey, is this well on this road, or is this location is not correct? Can you help us? Or is that just too much work?
No, in fact, I would welcome that opportunity and I appreciate that invitation and that is something that we can include with our contractors to have them do that because we're not going to have the students. But
Gotcha.
the contractors definitely, we can do that. And I appreciate that. We'll do that.
I think it would probably speed it up, especially, because most guys will remember, oh yeah, I remember that job. And,
Right.
Blah, blah, blah. Because in a lot of cases, I shouldn't say a lot of cases, in many cases, the driller that drilled the well isn't the person that's filling out the well record on well logic a lot of times. And bigger like Cribley, Adams, myself, Katz, the bigger guy, the driller drilled it. I know where the well was supposed to go, but maybe something changed, But, or maybe I fat fingered it, or they wrote down the coordinates wrong. That it's a possibility, and I think to speed up the process, it would help. Because I think accurate information, knowing what's going on with the water withdrawal tool, accurate information is extremely important.
Right. So this will improve the water withdrawal tool as well as our efforts for the groundwater data warehouse.
Yeah.
That I touched on briefly at the conference. And that data warehouse will be more comprehensive because the data will not be just water wells. It will be remediation focused wells. It may be oil and gas wells. It may be geotechnical borings. But it will definitely give us a better perspective of what we have in the subsurface and a better idea of how much water is available and refine our delineation of aquifers and their quantities and what their quality is. So that's in progress. That's what I've got for improving well locations.
Okay. Executive Directive 2021-9 recap.
I wish I had more information. This is going to be really speedy quick. We haven't heard anything yet. We know that it's gone over to the governor's office and haven't heard anything more.
PSC, you guys had to kind of lead this effort. Did they have to issue a report?
They did, and I believe it's still draft that we have not seen come back.
Okay.
That was what we discussed in the last,
Yeah,
we have all.
the DJ just had one that they sent out, and the EGLE, I think it was working on something to release. But I think you guys, I mean, it's way above your head,
It is way above our,
so we haven't seen anything. We've been asking for it, so we haven't seen anything yet.
right?
But I thought the deadline to have the report was done last year.
It was.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
But, you know, it's just a deadline.
Something went forward.
Yeah, something like that.
We just don't have access to it at our pay rates.
Right.
Okay.
And Brian Thurston indicated this in the last. So
Okay.
hopefully, maybe we'll have something for the next meeting, so we'll table this for now.
So put it on unfinished business for next time?
Yep.
Okay.
But based on some of the things that I've heard, the governor, that they want to move forward with the 24 budget.
Yeah.
I would think somebody's looked at something.
Well, there's what, an additional $30 million for local health. I know it's not all just water issues. but
Right.
I don't know if they're putting more money towards just clean water act stuff up on this level. But
Now, I don't believe it's up on the shelf. I believe that they're using what
okay.
they have.
Okay.
We just don't know how far it's.
Apparently, we're on a need to know basis. We don't need to know, right?
Not yet.
All right, anything else on that? Executive directive? It's basically, we're all in the dark right now, so.
Yeah.
Mushrooms.
Yes.
PFAS. Who's gonna take that one?
Yeah.
Oh,
he was done.
I'll take that one. Good morning, everybody. See some familiar faces here. Thanks for having me. My name's Ian Smith. I'm in the EGLE Drinking Water Environmental Health Division as well. I head up our emerging contaminants unit. So I'd like to give you a little bit of an update today on where things are with some of our PFAS sampling. And I apologize to those of you who hear this on a roughly monthly basis, sometimes more than once a month. Some of this will be familiar, but for those of you who don't, please let me know if you have any questions. So I have a few slides, so I'm going to turn my camera off here. All right. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to start with just an overview of what we've seen during the last nearly 3 years of PFAS compliance monitoring within our drinking water program. So in August 2020, Michigan promulgated PFAS MCLs for 7 compounds, and I'll show you those in a minute if you're not familiar with them, but these MCLs apply to the top 2 classifications of public water supplies here on this slide. So all of this data is coming from these types of supplies. I'll talk a little bit further on in my review here of sampling that has been done in transient and type 3 supplies as well as private water supplies. But for this first part, we're just talking about non-transient, non-community, and community water supplies. So these are the MCLs that Michigan promulgated back in 2020. As you can see, we went with individual numbers for individual compounds. And I think the numbers shown there in the second column give some indication as to why that was the case. When we did this, the Science Advisory Work Group through MPART did a review of all of the available PFAS data that it could get its hands on back in 2019, 2020. They were able to come up with these 7 numbers, and they range in order of magnitude considerably, as you can see. So at that point in time, rather than trying to move toward a mixture or a class-based MCL, we went with these 7 individual numbers. The way that compliance is calculated is based on a running annual average. So standard monitoring for a public water supply for PFAS is quarterly. It is possible to reduce that to annual monitoring in our state if you're able to demonstrate your levels are consistently and reliably below the MCL. But if you cannot do that, we're taking samples once per quarter. We're averaging those out. Generally, it takes an entire year to get to the point where a running annual average can be calculated, but there are some cases where the levels are so high that it does not take a full year for that number to exceed. All right, so these are the results from the past 3 years of sampling. And I'll let you know that the numbers in this table, this indicates the number of supplies, not the number of samples. So some of these supplies have sampled multiple times. And what's shown in this table would be kind of the worst case scenario for each individual supply. So if a supply has been non-detect for 2 years and then had a detection, it would show up on this list as a detection. All right, so as you can see, we're sampling approximately 2,400 supplies. And as a result of that sampling, we've come up with 5 current exceedances. So I don't want to minimize the PFAS issue. It is still an issue, but as far as the effect that promulgating these MCLs have had directly on these supplies, it's been considerably less than many of us feared as we started this process of statewide sampling. So here's just another representation of what we've seen across all of those supplies sampled under the Safe Drinking Water Act for PFAS. About 86% non-detect across the board. Of the remaining supplies which did have detections, you can see that most of those detections were at a level below the 7 Michigan PFAS MCLs. Of those which were above the 7 Michigan PFAS MCLs, about 1%. Again, currently we have 5 total supplies which are in a state of exceedance. All right, so I'm going to shift gears here for a moment. The other kind of big bin of PFAS in drinking water results that the state is collecting and sharing is through MPARTS sampling in and around areas of interest and PFAS investigation sites. And I wanted to share here at the bottom of this slide, there is a web address. I would encourage you all to visit that if you have any additional questions following my presentation here. You can kind of pick through based on which portion of the state you're interested in. You can see what has been found, what site investigations are ongoing, what the results for those are. These results are, just say they're numerous, but they're not as kind of centrally collected as the public water supply results that I just gave you a bit of an overview of. So these are kind of collected more on a case-by-case basis. So this sampling is done, again, MPART and EGLE divisions identify different sites around the state where there's a known or suspected or historically known source of PFAS. You decide to go in and do extensive sampling to assess what the impact is. As part of that sampling, typically they're going to, they may do, monitoring well sampling, but more likely the bulk of the sampling is going to be existing water wells. And often, if not the majority of the time, these include wells that are not being sampled for PFAS under the Michigan Safe Drinking Water Act. So these would be private residential wells and business wells that classify as, either type 2 transient supplies or type 3 public water supplies. Again, these results are shared on that website I pointed out earlier. I'll mention there is a kind of an interactive map that's being developed there. So the method in which these results are being shared is improving day by day. In the past, it's been just tables you have to pour through to get to the results you want. Now you can go in on the map and find your area of interest and look for results. The other thing I will mention is for these supplies, or I'm sorry, for these wells that are being sampled as part of these investigations, if necessary, especially in the case of private residential wells, in some cases, point of use filters are being provided and maintained in those cases. It's my understanding typically, I think and some folks on this call may be able to actually let me know if this is incorrect at all, but it's my understanding there are a few different models that are being provided, but largely speaking, these are NSF certified under counter-mounted kind of spigot systems. I think Aquasana is the main manufacturer that's being used. The other thing I'll mention, and here, let me go to this next slide. The other thing I'll mention, this is just a map of the current state of things as far as ongoing site investigations across the state. There's about 240 of them. One of the questions that Dave provided me in preparation for this update was, a question from you all. Are there any sites where active remediation has been installed and is in use for PFAS? So I did a bit of a review of these 240 sites, and from what I can tell from my review is that for the most part, these site investigations are still in the sampling phase. We're still attempting to define the extent and impact of PFAS contamination in the groundwater. I think that in many of these cases, remediation is perhaps being discussed and maybe something that's going to be put in place down the road. So that's my update. I just wanted to leave a little bit of time in case any of you had any questions for me. And if not, thank you very much. I see a hand there. Adam, you have a question?
Yeah, on page 6 or 7, you had mentioned there was 5 wells.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a common denominator in these 5 wells? Are we talking drift wells, mixed bag of bedrock and drift, steel casings, before grouting was, is there anything
that is a great question. That is not something I have dug into, but now that you've said it, it's something that I would be happy to look into and get back with you.
All right.
So you're thinking common denominator as far as construction, as far as placement, depth, things
Correct.
like that?
Yeah, are these wells that are, do they need to be replaced anyways? Is the casing getting bad? Was it before grouting was something? And if they are drift wells, I can understand that, but if they're bedrock wells that are being constructed now, how far down is the PFAS getting and things like that? I just was kind of curious to know if they were all the same.
Okay, that's something I can look into for you and certainly get back to you on that. Thank you for that question. Let's see. I see Buddy has his hand up.
Yeah, my question is, how does your contamination MCL compare to what the EPA is going to bring out of 4 parts per trillion?
Oh, that's a great question, and that's something we've been digging into over the past week here within our division. Not just the numbers, but the way that they're proposing, monitoring would be implemented. So what I can tell you at this point is, so the EPA, for those of you who aren't familiar, the EPA has proposed a set of MCLs for PFAS as well. So these would be nationwide. They've set 2 of them at individual MCLs. Those would be PFOA and PFOS. For those 2, they've determined that because the health outcomes associated with those are cancer related, they've set MCL goals at 0. Because we're not at a point where we can practically sample and treat to 0, they've provided MCLs of 4 parts per trillion for each, which they feel is a reasonable level to detect to. So PFOA and PFOS are both 4 parts per trillion. The other 4 compounds are a little more complex in that PFHXS, PFNA, PFBS, and HFPODA, also known as Gen X, these 4 are looked at as a mixture. And there is actually a formula that you would plug your detections into where those detections are compared to individual health numbers for each, and it spits out a hazard index. If that hazard index exceeds 1, then the MCL is exceeded. So that's a little bit different of an approach than what we do in the state. We regulate all 6 of the compounds they've proposed. In the case of the 2 that have individual numbers, our numbers are higher. We look at 8 parts per trillion for PFOA, 16 for PFOS. So we'll be reassessing those to see how we'll get them down to, it's still yet to be determined if EPA's numbers will be final, but if they are, the proposed numbers become final, it's my understanding that we'll be required to meet those. So we'll be doing a new rulemaking to meet those. As far as the 4 numbers they're plugging into that hazard index, some of theirs are higher than ours, some are lower. So we'll be looking at those on a case-by-case basis as well to make sure that any changes to the rule offer the most protection kind of between the 2. So I guess the short answer to your question is in progress. We're still in progress of assessing what this means for us. But at the end of the day, I expect our numbers will change if the EPA numbers do hold. But that is yet to be determined if that'll be the case. I hope that answers your question. I just rambled.
I figured you're going to lower because my understanding is everybody has to meet the MCL of EPA. You can be strict, but you can't be more.
Well, the good news is, or one piece of good news is that we require our laboratories in Michigan to sample and report down to 2 parts per trillion. So we're confident based on that 4 parts per trillion is something that can be attainable and that requirement can be met. As far as the others, we have incidence data for all 6 of the compounds that they've proposed. We have a good sense of where we're seeing it and at which level. We project there will be an increase in the number of supplies in the state who would be in exceedance of the new federal MCLs, but we have a good idea of which supplies those are and what regions of the state they represent.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I see a hand from Eric.
Yeah, so piggybacking on Adam's questions there, are these wells located in the lower peninsula? Did you find it in the upper peninsula? Are they scattered all over? Just be nice to know where those locations were. I know that there's not a whole lot of data up here in the UP yet, but with 5, are they concentrated in a certain area or all over?
I will add an answer to that question to my summary when I send it over, and I can send that to. Would it be best to send it to Buddy so he can share it with the group? Okay, yes. I see him nodding. Okay, great. But I'll get that question answered as well. My general sense is they're a bit spread out, but I'd like to look at a map with that precise question in mind to give you a sense of where they're located and maybe just provide a map to you. All right, Sarah, I see your hand.
Hi, Ian. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good. I got it. Just for the 4 parts per trillion, I just want a clarifying question on that one.
Mhm.
Is that specifically for community and non-community and not for residential, or will that include residential wells?
So
At some point.
the at some point question, I can't speak to because I'm not sure how it will trickle down, but the way it is proposed is that the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, the MCLs in the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act will apply specifically to community water supplies and non-transient, non-community water supplies. So type 1 and then type 2 non-transient.
Okay, so it would not at this current time be adapted to transient type 3 or residential.
Not as an MCL, yep.
Okay, so here's my just long game thought about that is if
Mhm.
there is the intent over time to do it to go toward that with the residential wells, I'm really, really hopeful that there's a long-term strategy being thought about that in terms of how to guide people through well maintenance and through conditioning systems. Because what I worry about, especially in just speaking from the area and my experience here in Kent County, that would put a large percentage of our people either under the requirement to connect to municipal water, or they would have to be looking at an alternative water source. So it's just something to think about is I think that long game as we get into these lower and lower standards, especially when we're at parts per trillion, it's going to have a really significant impact on our residential wells and our transient wells and our P3 wells, and more than likely on the well drilling industry, just because it's going to make people end up being their own sort of water operator. And it's going to take a lot more education on the residential side that they're not really aware of. And I think that they're reliant on the health department and well drillers for. So just thinking about long game, what are the resources available to support in those efforts? And just what would that strategy look like moving forward before we get to a point where we're looking at rules being promulgated? I think that strategy should be well developed in advance.
Okay. That makes sense to me. I will pass that concern along. That's a good point. Thank you, Sarah.
I got a couple of questions. This is Tony.
Sure, Tony.
How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm just wondering on your chart there, how many detections of MCLs, how would those numbers increase the current MCL exceedances or even the detection if we lowered the PFOA and the PFOS to 4?
So that's a question I've been working on answering, and I have kind of the rough draft version of it. So the general sense would be, so we have 5 current. We've had 7 over time. So we would go from that 5 to 7 number up to over 50. So that'll give you a sense of the difference in magnitude. I'm still pinning down the precise numbers, which supplies are active, which ones aren't, which ones would. Anyway, I'm still tweaking the numbers a little bit, but the general sense of it is that we would go from 5 to 7 up to 50 to 60. So nearly a 10-fold increase.
And then I wasn't quite sure, I didn't understand the answer on the residential
Mhm.
private wells that were tested. Do you have a sense of how many of those have been tested? And if you even
I
know
see.
about all of the ones, if there's labs that run those tests that we're not even aware of?
I would say it is likely that there are kind of private results out there. One thing we can do, and that I'm planning to do, is so we have the ability to look at the private wells that have been sampled by, for example, AECOM. So it's not all of them, but it's a kind of a big chunk. So what I'm planning to do is have our folks over in MPART run kind of a data analysis of how many of those wells exceed these new numbers. So I can provide in the near future kind of a rough estimate of what the increase will be based on that data. It's imperfect, but your point is well taken, Tony. There's data out there that we don't have access to. There's data out there that exists kind of in pieces around EGLE and MDHHS, perhaps. We're still trying to pool that data more generally. So I'm going off on a tangent, but in the meantime, what I will do and what I'm not sure it'll be ready for tomorrow's Maliha meeting, but sometime in the near future at a Maliha meeting, I'll be able to provide the answer to your question based on the AECOM data.
Can you give this update that you gave here tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay, can you share that and I can put it on the screen for everybody?
Yes, I can send that to
Okay,
you.
today, and I appreciate that. And
You
then I
got it.
promise this is the last question that I had was, just a general comment, but, I'm thinking about lead. The recommendation, I know this is from the feds, but, if it's 0 and they settled at 4 because, that's where they could probably.
Where are we going? All free.
Sorry.
Dana.
You recognize her laugh.
Oh,
She's
but anyway, sorry, Dan. I just heard Dana laughing, but.
yeah, that is who it was.
Having fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun there. Lost my whole train of thought now.
You were talking about the idea of
lead data,
MCLG.
yeah.
Yep.
If you throw out there that it's 0 is what they would like to see, it's just like lead. To tell a parent, a mom that, hey, they're drinking something and the recommendation is this, but we're at 15 or we're at 12 or we're at 5 or 3, whatever it is, they expect it to be 0.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just throw a recommendation. You might as well just say that's an MC. That's the standard. To try to explain that to a family or the public, and it's hard enough anyway with a lifetime at parts per trillion. There's so many things here that are so unique. Just something to think about and consider when your messaging goes out, whatever you guys decide to do with the federal standards, I'm sure you're going to say this over and over.
Yep. So we'll be entering into the public comment period for EPA's proposed rule will be starting soon as their rule is published in the Federal Register. EGLE is planning on having conversations with the EPA regarding our thoughts on what they've proposed. I would encourage everybody here, if you have the opportunity to do so as well. So they're required to respond to each comment that's given to them. And I expect, for example, the concern that Tony just raised, it's not going to be the only time they hear that one. So I would encourage you all to provide your feedback as well. But I will take that in mind, Tony, as we prepare our response. Sarah, I see your hand again. Oh, sorry, you're muted.
I have a lot of reservations about this. And I guess the thing is, kind of just to bounce off of what Tony was saying, is that for people who have had large scale PFAS contamination in their counties, I will have to explain to probably people in 5 different townships why the level's being lowered and why we didn't care, in their words, care about them 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So I think that there would be a really big, what would be ideal is if we could have mutual support from EGLE and MDHHS to explain the risk communication to residents who have already been through this experience, who have levels that are lower than what is being, or higher than what is being proposed, and help explain why we needed to, why the decisions that were made when they were made, and why things got changed. Because it's really difficult at the health department level when these things come down at the from the feds, and then when they look to us at public health thinking you're a bunch of dummies basically. And why didn't you do something to protect us sooner? So I have some really, really strong reservations, not whether or not the level should be more protective. I just have really there's a lot that goes into when you're talking about contamination with people in their homes. There's the public trust. There's a whole lot that goes into it. that I think needs to be really well thought and communicated to the community before this even goes into place. I think that we need to maybe start having those communications now and really bringing people up to speed, because if we don't, all of a sudden, they're gonna hear about it in the news and they're gonna blow up a whole bunch of people's phones. And we're all gonna be giving different messaging. So I think that, just again, if we could really think about that comm strategy and make sure it's shared with not only health departments, but also well drillers, I think that that would be really, really helpful to help kind of explain where we're going, why we're going that way and whatnot, and what it means to Michigan. Because I think when we start explaining it individually as one-offs, that's when it gets really murky and the distrust comes in from the public, and like, who do we trust to talk to us about the health and safety of our water? So just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Right. Any more questions for me? All right, I'll get the answers to Eric and Adam's questions over to you all as soon as possible. As a follow-up to that, let me know if you need me to come in the future and chat about this anymore. I'm sure things are going to be developing here over the next several months, and I'll be in touch probably with Dave on a regular basis. So if you need me to come back, please let him know or let me know, and I'd be happy to come back and chat with y'all. Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. I'm glad we had this. And I think it needs to continue on our agenda until we, to be honest with you, get ahead of this a little bit. Anybody have anything else on that subject? If not, we're going to move to contractor examination information. Dave?
Yeah, I can take that one. I received an email from Kathy as far as the exams go. No exam was held. It's the last meeting, and for the upcoming exam for April 14, we have one retake for a well driller, 5 pump installers, 6 well drillers, and then 1 pump installer is taking to become a well driller.
Nice. Nice. We'll have those numbers, I'm sure, after the test at our next meeting. Contractor enforcement update, Brad.
Good morning, everyone. So since our last meeting, we issued the notice of intent and had the informal hearing at EGLE with a driller for late logs. We weren't able to come to an agreement, so we're going to be moving forward with a contested case on that individual. And then we have another contested case that has been going for 2 years that is starting to get to the finish line. We got an update on from the judge on that, so we'll see how that progresses. But both of those are kind of at the Attorney General's office right now, so not in EGLE's hands specifically at the moment.
Anything else that's emerging, or are we pretty all quiet on the Western Front here?
We've got 4 or 5 that are being looked at. 2 are with general non-compliance. They have a wide variety of issues. They just not caring about the rules or statute. And then 2 for logs. So hopefully I'll have an update with those. Where I'm currently working on our enforcement process with the AG and making sure that our process is on firm legal ground before we proceed with those. So once I get that update, we'll go ahead and move forward. And then I guess I'll add I did present on the enforcement process at the MIHA conference last week and got a number of questions from health departments. So hopefully we provided some clarity on that.
Good, good. That's a good thing. I think if everybody's on the same page on how to proceed, it helps everybody along, you know, or whether to proceed or not, you know. So that's good. Does anybody have any questions on contractor enforcement? I will say this, without being involved in the case that went to the judge, I'm glad to see that the judge has got back with somebody because it's been a long time. So, regardless of what the determination is, I think it needs to come to some sort of determination. So anyways, anybody have any other comments? If not, other business or comments? Anybody have anything? John, you've been pretty quiet on the phone. You got any comments you want to make?
Very interesting meeting, especially about the PFAS info. Pretty technical, but very interesting. Glad to hear that the conference went very well. Sadly, I missed it again. I think these meetings are a good idea.
Okay. Thanks, John. New agenda items for the next meeting. Well, number one, cement. Hopefully will be done. I'd say number two, I think we need to revisit PFAS and have Ian Smith back on with some answers to his questions and maybe even an update. And to be honest with you, I thought Sarah Simmons and Adam and Eric brought up some very good points that hopefully he can get answered, because the more we know about A, what type of wells, or is it a gambit, and B, Sarah's correct. It's not only that. I think the health departments and sanitarians are going to get bombarded with questions, but we're going to get them too. And I think we need to get ahead of this, because if these MCLs become final and we don't have a plan ahead, we might have a public relations issue, and that's not good. All of us, the whole industry. So PFAS, I will put something together on Maliha, MIHA, and DHHS, and hopefully have something, even if we can just get a meeting of the minds and put that together. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put together a checklist of questions to ask, and I'm going to get that to this committee for marijuana grows, even though I think the industry is in dire straits at this point in time. Sometime when you have an industry that's in dire straits, that's the time you really should be paying attention. So I'll have that together here in the next week or so, and I'll get that to Dave to share. Other than that, hopefully we'll have another report on the executive directive by our next meeting for agenda. And we'll have contractor examination results, hopefully. Does anybody else have anything else?
Have the contractor results, and we're hopeful that we'll have something
Right.
on it.
How about, well, I'm not gonna put that on the agenda right now. I'll talk to you guys about that. Something in my noggin, I'm thinking. Dave, you're gonna have some trainings too, you might be able to talk about.
This is Brad, if I have my process review completed with the AG, I'll provide an update on the enforcement process.
Excellent, excellent, good. Other than that, next meeting date, are we looking at May or June?
June,
June. How does June 8th look for everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the morning?
Afternoon
We
is
have
better. for
done
me.
it historically at 1 o'clock in the afternoon is our normal time.
Yeah.
But if people like
People
the
like
morning,
mornings or in the afternoon?
I would rather do afternoons. Mornings is tough. But what everybody else wants, if everybody wants to go mornings, that's fine. I'll make it work. June 8th, want to shoot for 1 o'clock?
Afternoon works better for me. I know that.
Afternoon for me as well.
Okay, all right. So let's go 1 o'clock.
Buddy,
in the
this is John. I think afternoon is better.
Okay, thank you.
I agree. Mornings, you're trying to get everybody out the gate.
Okay. All right.
Exactly, exactly. You still got your plate half full in the morning, where in the afternoon is probably clear.
Okay, so Eagle staff, okay with 1 o'clock on the 8th?
June 8th?
Yep. It's a date then. All right. I would entertain a motion to adjourn if there's nothing else.
So move.
Okay, so moved. You guys have a good day.
Good day, buddy. Have a good day, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it, everybody. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day, everyone.